Welcome back, everybody, to the Freedom Train International Special Reports tonight. We've got a great honor here tonight with these guests and that are courageous enough to come on here and speak to us about something that I think is must the discussion must carry on. And just before I introduce everybody, I want to start the thinking off with a statement that I heard between Senator Johnson and Neil Oliver that there was three types of people out there right now. One that just wanted COVID to go away so they could pretend it didn't happen and carry on with their lives. Two that wanted COVID to go away because they were complicit and they didn't want accountability. And three, those that were relentless in the pursuit of justice. And that is the underlying theme of our gathering here tonight for the Freedom Train International is to I think we're all a part of that final category of people, the people that are relentless in the pursuit of justice. So I'm very humbled and honored to have some amazing guests joining me today for the second segment. Buckle up, guys. You guys are going to hear a lot over the next 3-4 more hours of this. But Dr. Sansone and Dr. Trozzi, you guys have been here before, so I'm going to start this with esteemed guest Sasha Latypova. Sasha, it's a real privilege. I've been following your work for a very long time, and you have been the most courageous of the courageous in where you come from and what you do and what you've been exposing. And I think your testimony here tonight to the world audience that's tuned in from everywhere is incredibly pertinent to what I opened the conversation with. So thank you for being a part of that relentless pursuit of justice. And I think it's high time that we started moving the conversation in the public square to a more accurate frame of reference. For those that aren't familiar with your work, I highly encourage people to go and subscribe to your Substack. But give us a brief outline before you get started on how you come to be this person that is sitting here with us today, and we'll get into some of the stuff that have been uncovering through this journey.
Yes, well, thank you for inviting me. As far as my background, I spent about 25 years in pharmaceutical and medical device research and development, and I ran, more recently, I ran several contract research organizations. It's contractors to pharma companies and medical device companies performing clinical trials. And so I'm very familiar with pharmaceutical regulations and all over the world. And I interacted frequently on behalf of my clients with FDA and EMA and Japan regulators submitting safety data for drugs and devices. And so I retired from the industry prior to COVID because we sold our companies, and I didn't need to work anymore. I wanted to do something else. I was just taking it easy, having a great life. And then, in early 2020, they started fear mongering about this, virus. And I was like everyone else. I was taking their word for it for a couple of months, and I thought, yeah, maybe it's something serious, maybe something I should be, worried about. And then I realized it was total nonsense, and especially my kind of all kinds of flags came up when they started prosecuting doctors for trying to treat patients with hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin, and my jaw was on the floor at that point because I was like, this is what are you talking about? This practice of medicine, approved drugs. They're generally safe, so doctors can use them off-label. It's a normal thing. And when I saw what they were doing, when they were, how they were using the courts, fighting, even when in the court order, when there was a court order to treat the person with ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, the hospital wouldn't do it, and nobody was being accountable. So they would kill people with ventilators and remdesivir against the court orders to treat with hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin, and nobody was held accountable, and still nobody is accountable for those crimes. Those are crimes. Those are hospital murders: kidnap, battery, assault, poisoning, deliberate murder with narcotics, with remdesivir, with ventilators. So those are serious crimes. and nobody has been held accountable. And so, and when I saw this, I started investigating. And my investigation, I went straight into the subject that I know, which is pharmaceutical regulations. And I started looking into when they pushed out these mRNA shots, which I knew was a very dangerous class of pharmaceuticals. I've seen it in the industry before. It failed all the time. It killed people in clinical trials. There were huge scandals around it. And so when I started pushing it as a vaccine, my jaw was on the floor yet again. And I was like, well, at this point I have to start looking for myself. And I went into Bayer's database. I wasn't a user of Bayer's. We always use proprietary databases. I never used Bayer's. It's very difficult. I mean, it's not difficult, but it's just a bad database. But in any case, the signal was undeniable. The signal was so huge. Doesn't matter what type of database, you see it right away. And again, nobody was paying attention. I was the first person who identified the batch variability. You may have heard about this. But that was my first analysis. The first thing I went to look for is, are they good manufacturing practice compliant or not? And that's what you do. It's a very simple analysis that we always run because we have to be compliant. So we always run it on a variety of things that we're doing. And so this basic data analysis that I did. I published it in October of 2021. First in the world, and then I've collaborated with Craig Parity Cooper, who replicated this analysis and built a website around it. It's called How Bad Is Your Batch? So we worked on it for about 2 years together. And so that was the data that I was showing. Of course, I was banned immediately everywhere. Not that I had any social media presence, I didn't. But even the little that I had, I was banned right away.
Well,
You know?
that was kind of where thankfully you were banned, because that's probably the only reason why I found your work, and your work has carried a lot of trips around the globe since then, and so that's a wonderful place to start. And I want to switch over to Dr. Sansone here for a few moments. We've got a rare lecture, a rare gift in this panel here tonight. We've got science, psychology, and frontline medicine joining us here today. So, Dr. Sansone, when did you realize that this was a criminal endeavor? And you've come a long ways. We've known each other for some time now. There's a lot in between there. We've only got an hour here today. So give the folks a quick introduction as to where you realized this was the beginning of a crime spree, and we'll kind of finish off and carry through your guys' work as we go, because things are changing, I think.
Yeah, they are. I'm laughing because I had a conversation with James Roguski the other day just about this thing. And he's like, when did you first know? And I had a very Zen moment. I was like, well, I was aware before I knew anything. Which is kind of Zen, because the more you know, the less you're aware you are, So I was a political animal in the 90s. So like I was involved in the Buchanan movement. I was chairing Pat Buchanan's presidential campaign. He kind of invented the Modern America First movement. So, we knew 9/11 was a scam and an inside job, and those stupid wars were unpatriotic and all that stuff. So we were kind of aware of that. So in late 2019, I saw this was the same playbook coming down. So I literally wept when they did the 15 days to slow the curve. I'm like, wow, they're actually doing it. So I knew immediately without knowing all the details. And it's not that hard, because you see their patterns on their behavior. You just kind of anticipate. So yeah, I did. And, and I knew they were going to follow up with a quote unquote vaccine, like, before it came out. And it's not because I saw any data. It's just, it was kind of obvious what they were doing. But has nothing to do with intelligence, anything like that, because I've got conversations with, it's just prior experience. For some reason, you've had something in your life that you've experienced that caused you to look at things differently, question it, and that kind of thing. And so for me, I was fortunate enough to be that much of a rebel in my 20s that, even though I took, 20 years off of it, I'm coming back and I'm like, oh, wow, they didn't skip a beat. And so, yeah, so I was aware without knowing anything. And I still don't know anything.
I think the more we learn, the less we know. That's kind of what I hold on to. Dr. Trozzi, we've been in the trenches a long time together already, and you've been at the front line, not just of dealing with the victims of these crimes, but the victims of the lack of knowledge and understanding. And I think, I call what Dr. Sansone was saying, or the propaganda immunity, it's been naturally developed in some of us, and it is far more safe and effective than anything that the media companies are telling us, right? So, Dr. Trozzi, you've paid a steep price for all of this. We'll kind of swing into the canceling and the censorship and the persecution, because I think we're still in this place, understanding the path of where we have to get to accountability and justice. We still need to speak about the truth, and there's still so much of that is being buried, denied, hidden, and leveraged in a lot of cases. I mean, they're still trying to stick people with these magic poison darts.
Well, it's interesting. I certainly relate to what Joseph's saying, and you're saying, that there's some, past life experiences, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So and I mean, people used to say, and it's quite true, you believe the news until you're in the news. And then you find out, oh my God, because it's totally inaccurate report generally. Now, that was the old days. It was nothing like propaganda on steroids like you have now, especially in a WEF-occupied propaganda state like the region of Canada. But, and at the same time, definitely living in the same story that Sasha is describing. You could see we were definitely on the same planet because we were seeing the same things. And so I'm not sure if you're asking me, in terms of, the early wake up element of it. I mean, I can comment to the persecution and the criminality of the college and that whole element as well. But, at the very beginning, I mean, hospital's empty. You're told it's full. The waiting room TV is showing like all this cases, COVID. The people across the street are holding signs, "We love you," and they think you're like struggling for your life. And for the first time in 27 years, I had no work, and I worked my butt off for 27 years leading up to that. So that was a bit of an eye opener. And the fact that it didn't just last a day or two, like if it lasted a day or two, like, yeah, everybody's gone home because it's coming. And there was this, it's coming, but it never came. It never did come. But what did come is things got weirder and weirder. And then, of course, I like to joke, for lack of dancing skills, hence I didn't do any great pieces on TikTok with the nurses I was working with. But what I did do was study what I was told was coming, which was coronavirus, and great treatment options like ivermectin and zinc and hydroxychloroquine, and were obvious. The suppression of autopsies was a weird one too. Like, why would you not want to do an autopsy? And now we know, because what you'd find out is there was also special microvascular clotting in the rare case that was COVID, as opposed to a billion other things being diagnosed as COVID with the PCR scan. So, doing my homework, it became pretty obvious within a month or two. But then the point where the gloves really had to come off for me was when I got the emergency use authorization for Pfizer and Moderna's jabs. And you could get it for AstraZeneca too, and Johnson & Johnson. And now, Sasha, you were more familiar with mRNA from your experience in pharmaceutical. I looked at I got the EUA. I scanned down to the ingredients like a typical kid reading a cereal box. And I didn't see the ingredients of a vaccine. I didn't see an attenuated virus. I saw, I'm like, messenger RNA, modified messenger RNA, pegylated nanoparticles. Again, still in an empty hospital so I could do my research. So I put a lot more research into those damn shots by now, but within a few hours, I knew that we had a weapon being pointed at the people's head, whether it was through negligence, malfeasance, just entire global madness, or whatever it was. I was aware that things weren't right, that Bill Gates had mounted Tedros and China had set him up, and how things had been hacked. And but at that point, it's like, whoa, I mean, never mind, you will own nothing and be happy, which is clearly part of their trajectory for their slave colony, plan. But you'd also probably be dead or very sick or growing cancer if you took these damn shots sooner or later, autoimmune disease, etc. All the stuff that we warned about and we're watching unfold. So that was the point where I said, nothing else matters. Everything I've worked for in my life in terms of the material things, which really wasn't what I worked for in life. I'm trying to live an experience here, somewhat of a sacred journey, and hopefully impress God in the end, and at least, be something valid rather than just something that accumulates a bunch of stuff and then dies. But all my stuff kind of had to go. in order to do what had to be done, which was clearly, before anyone got a needle stuck in them, a doctor, at least in my country, it was happening in other places, needed to come out full speed and say, this is not a vaccine. This is a crime. I was actually warning the doctors and nurses. Like, I wrote an article about ethics in the law. I'm like, we're being coerced to commit a crime. Don't do it. So, and from then, because it hasn't gone away, and I don't feel our grandchildren are safe yet, and, the same parasite class doing this or doing other things. So that's where I continue to put my energy, regardless of what, some useful idiots or psychopaths in medical colleges, like all that stuff's crumbling at such high speed. You can't take it serious. Like I feel very proud of what I've done over the last 4 years. It doesn't matter that, according to the college, quote, guess what? I'm ungovernable. You're damn right I'm ungovernable if you try to kill people. I'm governable by God. I'm governable by the Hippocratic Oath. I'm governable by the Golden Rule, but I'm not governable by you. It's like, you're going to kill people and shut your mouth. So that's kind of my story, to where we are now.
I want to just add to that. I actually own a URL called The Ungovernable, and I've never used it for anything yet because it just the time isn't there yet. But for me, that was kind of how I saw myself when they started with the masks. After being a breathing air specialist for 15 years, they started with the mask, and I was like, what? That was, and I'm completely uneducated, right? But that was the tripping point for me. So I started to become this ungovernable individual, and I came across Sasha's first work in How Bad Was My Badge, and that's still a site that's getting used to this day. So many thanks to you for all of you guys' work and everything that you've been doing. But the next thing I want to switch this over here a little bit to the weapon, that term that you used, Mark, in that. Sasha, it was again you that opened my eyes with the work that you and Catherine Watt were doing. You want to take us to some of that? Because I think that now is the most important information that's out there in the public space that we need now to move forwards to that accountability and justice part. We've got, a lot of people around the world know the truth now a lot more than did a year or two ago, and it's become undeniable. So we have to kind of shift our thinking to where we're going, and that's if we want accountability and justice, we have to use the right vernacular, the right wording, the right descriptives to keep our arguments valid, so that we're not continuously dismissed in what we're trying to do. So to you.
Right. So it's also important, like I'm going to speak about the current moment and then go back to how we ended up here. So it's important to understand about the current moment. There's no accountability, and nobody at the official levels is telling the truth yet. So right now we're in lies 2.0 scenario, where the White House, for example, just now put out this webpage called Lab Leak. They're like, oh my God, we're telling you the truth now. Look at that. It's the second layer of lying. Okay. And I called it even 2 years ago. I started publishing a series of articles. At the time they kind of started airing that narrative that maybe it's a lab leak. And so, 2 years ago, I published articles, and I'm going to continue publishing that the second layer of lying is fake. There was no lab leak. Even if you can, manufacture something that can be called gain of function virus in the lab, it's a lab trick. Okay, it's a long discussion, but basically it's a lab trick. It's a synthetic chemical using a bunch of techniques, large molecules synthesized using both biological methods and chemical methods, gluing together, bunches of chemical biological matter and then calling it a virus. These tricks, even if you can produce them in the lab, they don't survive past the lab. So nothing leaks from labs. In fact, there are numerous papers showing that there are lab acquired infections, people working on these pathogens, and they lead nowhere, absolutely nowhere. And most of the time people are not even sick. It's all PCR nonsense. Okay, so anyway, so what they're talking about right now is the second layer of lying. There is no lab leak, and we know that they're lying because we're still under COVID pandemic emergency in the US and probably globally too. They're probably utilizing the same thing in Canada. The PrEP Act declaration. So my main focus right now is PrEP Act. PrEP Act is a piece of law that's enabling all this global crime. It exists only in the U.S., but they have synthetically produced the same effect of a PrEP Act in all other countries. So PrEP Act in the U.S. is a piece of law that was put in place 20 years ago. When I met Catherine Watt on Substack, I read her work. That clicked all the pieces of the puzzle in my head together. As I was, for about 2 years, I was investigating it, and I couldn't understand how they're getting away with all of this, how they're getting away with hospital murders, how they're getting away with vaccines that are killing and injuring masses of people, and there's no accountability. And so this explains how. So this piece of law that was put on the books 20 years ago was immediately called unconstitutional by Senators Biden, Hillary Clinton, Ted Kennedy, and Byrd. They very, very strongly spoke against it, called it hugely unconstitutional. Correctly, I agree with every word they said about it. And then they turned around and voted yes on it. And it is unconstitutional because it's a license to kill. So it enables the government to declare unilaterally a pandemic based on nothing, no data whatsoever. For COVID, it was declared without any data, no justification, and it's also classified because it's a national security classified military campaign. They open this PrEP Act declaration by nothing, by opinion of one individual, HHS secretary, who is currently RFK Jr. And this pandemic declaration has been most recently extended by Javier Becerra to last until December 2029. So when people are saying COVID is over, including RFK Jr., he's misrepresenting the reality. It's not over, and he's the only person who can actually make it over, but he's not doing it. And so we all need to understand we're still under the military classified campaign. They're still lying. Lying is legal under the PrEP Act. It's legal to put poison on the market. It's all these vaccines and remdesivir and ventilators and all that. It's all called countermeasures under this PrEP Act. And people who are using them to kill other people are called covered persons. This is what Dr. Trozzi refused to do. And all the honest doctors refuse to do. They're coercing doctors to be murderers, and they're giving them sovereign liability shield. So as long as you follow the orders of HHS and killing people with remdesivir, with fentanyl, with ventilator, and you are not liable for anything. And the same goes for the vaccines. Whoever administers them, if they kill a whole bunch of people, they're not liable because they're covered under this PrEP Act shield. So this is the monstrosity that is still being preserved, and nobody's being told about it. Did President Trump talk about it at all? No. RFK Jr.? No. Even though he's on video with me discussing it 2 years ago, all of this, what I'm telling you right now. So he knows all this. And they're not saying anything. They're just pretending that they're, we're looking for accountability. We're going to look into it. Look, we have a web page says lab leak. That's the second layer of lies. So that's what I want people to know.
That's huge. That is huge. They're playing a shell game with the truth, and I'm going to call on you, Dr. Sansone, next on this. They're playing the shell game with the truth, pretending that the truth isn't the truth, and trying to dupe us all again that this is a natural accident. If it's an accident, then nobody's really responsible. But meanwhile, if you play along with the game, you're going to be protected for committing mass murder.
Yeah, actually, can I say one thing quickly? So this whole lab leak webpage, I'm laughing at it because obviously when White House put that together, they forgot to tell NATO, because on NATO website, on their CBRN task force webpage, it still says that this was a natural evolved virus that they participated in. So, like now that the lies are falling apart because both parts of the criminal cartel haven't coordinated with each other.
Dr. Sansone, how do people you reconcile the truth from the crime spree?
Well, I've been employing a specific strategy. I mean, I think eventually the PrEP Act will be ruled unconstitutional because you've had different state rulings on it. And I just think when the Supreme Court literally looks at it, it's saying there's no judicial review. which is something we've had for 223 years case law since Marbury versus Madison. So, I mean, I get it, they're captured, but are they going to be that captured on that? I don't know. But logically, they should rule it unconstitutional. That might be an easier route than repealing it. I mean, it deals more with civil actions. And so I've been focusing on the criminal side of it. But even in the PrEP Act, it has a part in there about willful misconduct. And I think once you throw in the fact that this is a weapon of mass destruction and a biological weapon, it pierces through a lot of this stuff. And so my strategy has been to try to get a jurisdiction somewhere in these United States to recognize that these are, in fact, weapons of mass destruction and already illegal. And, you know, it's like and that's why I was seeing a lot of these efforts to, you know, I mean, I started with the Ban the J resolutions doing that, and then my litigation, which is, I'm in the appellate court right now. But like, so I'm seeing legislation pop up to repeal the shops and stuff like that. But I'm like, wait a minute, you really don't need it because they're already illegal. And I'm like, it's like giving them cover. So that's why I just put out like a sample bill. I call it the the MRA Bioweapons Prohibition Act. And it's really simple. It's just 2 pages, but it basically recognizes that the shots are already illegal according to state law. And so the states pretty much all have similar bioweapons or weapons of mass destruction laws that mirror the federal laws. And they cover chemical agents, biological agents, and devices. And so that has been introduced in Minnesota, and I'm trying to get other states. I'm trying to get it introduced in as many states as possible, and hopefully one state will pass it. Because look, I wouldn't even have to be doing this, or none, you know, Dr. Trozzi or Sasha wouldn't have to be doing this if somebody would do their job. If a county sheriff and a county prosecutor got together and just enforced the law, this would all fall apart. Because, like, even though, you know, even with the PrEP Act or in Title 50, it's like once you can get someone to establish this as a weapon, like, there's no defense against that. And you know what? If the federal government wanted to get into litigation against the state over that, let's see that play out within the Supreme Court with the federal government saying they have a right to hit us with bioweapons. I'll get the popcorn, you know, because that would be kind of funny. But yeah, I think that, you know, so I've been a little narrow focused on that because it just takes a lot of time when you're looking at case law and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I just straighten hours the path. Is these are weapons of mass destruction. And the reason why you have to really convey this to people is because if you're watching or listening right now, you need to understand most people you know will have shortened lifespans because of these injections, either getting them directly or from the shedding. That's a fact. Again, you don't have to be a medical doctor or a scientist to get that if you give enough people chronic diseases, you're shortening their lifespan. I have type 1 diabetes. On average, someone with type 1 diabetes, and which I've realized over the last few years is a vaccine injury from when I was a kid, but you know, you realize that, so the lifespan is 15 years less if you have type 1 diabetes than everyone else. And so I'd like to beat those odds, but you know, that's what it is. So I'm not saying not to panic people because, you know, I have an autoimmune disease, but most people have shortened lifespans, and that should anger you. You should have righteous indignation over that. Now, I know some research that's going to be coming out of Florida from Dr. Vila, which is going to be devastating because most people that got the shots, even if they're asymptomatic, have damaged immune systems. And it's either like, you know, like immune failure, like AIDS, or autoimmune disorder. So either way, you're shortening lifespans. And so, you know, according to her, you're going to see a huge pop up in the cancers because of that. So, yeah, I think that we need to, you know, asymmetrical warfare requires asymmetrical resistance. And I think you need to, you know, just poke and prod from every direction until someone breaks through. You know, I don't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers because nobody's won yet. But the reality is we just need to keep waking people up and engaging more people in this. They're murdering the people you know and love. 27 million Americans have taken these, or children have taken these injections. You know, 9 million have gotten the newest round of them. So they're murdering children now. And I agree. President Trump knows that these are biological weapons. RFK Jr. knows that these are biological weapons. Governor DeSantis here in Florida knows that these are bio. How do I know? Because I gave him a whole bunch of evidence. And the Surgeon General knows. So, I mean, we need to just keep calling these people out. Don't support a candidate. I show up at their events. Start challenging them, even if it's local people. Why aren't you speaking out against this? I challenge people at your church. Tomorrow is Easter. How many priests, you know, and ministers are talking about the murder of American people like this, or Canadians, or people around the world? This is ridiculous. You're all pretending it isn't going on. So, you know, I call BS on everybody.
I think we're going to have to do a lot more of these tables yet before we get to the point where there's enough people to see some definitive action. But in my mind, there obviously they have to be. We know that individuals are fully aware, but they're either dragging their heels or not doing their duty in the meantime, partly because not enough of us know, not enough of us are screaming from the mountaintops on what they're doing. So to me, people out there are taking this as a huge victory. Oh, this disclosure, COVID.gov, they're going after them, but yet they're not. Exactly the double lie, and that's allowing these murders to continue, the willful decimation of our society, and people are being protected by it. And Dr. Trozzi, they pull licenses from people like you, and you beat you into their version of submission on all of this. But I think that I think if we weren't becoming more aware, they wouldn't be afraid enough to try and deliver with the second lie. They know that they know that there are more of us are paying attention than they can shut up, and on all of this, and they're being exposed. So I hope you guys are going to come back for more of these in the future, because we still got a lot of work to do. So the travesty that I see in this, and this is directly to you, Mark. You've been a conscientious, good doctor saving lives for almost 30 years. You're out of the game now, as far as they're concerned. They've stopped you from saving lives. And this is what they're doing beyond just the continuing to stick kids with these, magic poison darts. They're kicking, they're holding them in contempt as well now. Thousands of kids just expelled in Canada because they haven't gotten up to date on their jobs. From a doctor's perspective, Mark, how do you not just curl up and give up, but instead you join world-class organizations instead to fight back on all of this? And what's the direction that you think, in incremental steps, that we need to be moving?
Well, thanks, man. It's a great question. Well, one thing's for sure, they haven't beaten me into submission. Right? Let's make sure that's clear. The other thing is, I'm not going to blow my own horn for long here, but I'm beyond an innocent man here. I've won medical heroes and awards, and a lot of smart people have a lot of respect for me based on what I've done for the last few years. And that's because I'm not alone, but I'm one of the medical doctors in the world and in Canada who has passed the trial by fire, this weird trial by fire. On the other hand, let's talk about the case, for instance, the College of Physician Surgeons of Ontario, like the College of Physician Surgeons of every province, like the medical colleges in the US. They have committed, at minimum, negligent, then malfeasant, and then really the cover-up alone drives them very far into intentional. Mass medical assault, mass murder. They have coerced doctors and nurses to themselves be victims of and participants in medical assault and mass murder. And some of us, by the grace of God, were able to navigate and not go off that cliff with them. So those are the people that really should be looking in the mirror, getting on their knees, doing some repentance, and trying to fix things, because otherwise they are going to wear their crimes on earth and in heaven, or not in heaven, maybe we should say. So the other side of this is, like when we think about, okay, so in Canada, for instance, especially in Ontario, you notice recently, because Charles Hoff case, because one judge who was part of the tribunal of the college held a line and said, no, we're going to look at the evidence. We're not going to just accept that the shots are safe. We're going to look at the evidence. The college immediately dropped all the charges. in my case, they've got some people who I have zero respect for, who dress up on Zoom meetings as judges to like do some technical switchity-roo and then say all the evidence we put before them of scientific importance, that there was no evidence. I never gave them any evidence. Like it was just a fiasco. It's a fiasco which says this is no longer legitimate. Okay. And that's the reality we live in. I'm not really that obsessed with democracy in terms of thinking that I got to wait for 51% of the population to live smart for a bunch of us to live smart. I'm quite happy with 3% of Canadians. 3% of us making a beautiful future together. Believe me, the other 97 will fall by the roadside. And so that's where we're at in this thing, right? So for instance, people are paying taxes in Canada and in Ontario. If you live in a town, like let's say you live in Englehart, Ontario, where you happened a few years ago to have a phenomenal young doctor, Dr. Patrick Phillips, a very good doctor, a very good emergency doctor, a very soft-spoken, loving, caring, kind human being. And when COVID came along, he kept his head on. He did his research. He was actually educating doctors from around the world. Were following just his notes. He wasn't looking for glory. He was just doing what he should. And he did the right thing. And every time he did the right thing through COVID, nobody complained. No patients complained. The college, the corrupted college, the college which has been under criminal control and is weaponizing an authority they're supposed to have to protect the public, instead weaponizing it to make the doctors dangerous to the public. They would launch a complaint. They would launch an investigation until eventually Dr. Phillips went in and said, you know what? It's so evil, Mark. I'm done. I fought it. I did so much. He's one of the great heroes of Canada. And he went and said, yep, you guys are right. Keep my license. I'm out of here. Dr. Francis Christian, one of the greatest surgeons in our country, retired, under the similar circumstances. So, but what does that mean for the people? What does it mean for the people of our country? It means that a major medical assault, a major medical scam was just pulled across the entire population. 80% of the population is poisoned. Many thousands of people are already dead from it. People have lost their children, their wives, their grandparents. Everybody's been abused. We've all been through a mental abuse thing. And the nurses and the doctors who stood up for the people, who maintained the oath, who continued to serve the people while the rest of the thing was being basically turned into a cult and abused and weaponized against the people, they have been kicked out of this tax-funded, narrow system that's totally corrupt now, which means the people are sitting ducks. So yeah, it's sad about great doctors like Roche and Killian losing their license, Patrick Phillips, Chris Shoemaker. So many good doctors have lost their license through this thing. But what's much more worse is that the people are denied access to those doctors. Mm-hmm. And the only doctors left are the ones who could be swallowed and mentally abused and beaten and injected into submission. And to boot, they have now watched these other doctors stripped of their licenses and go through all this stuff. And they're like, well, I didn't want to do it the first time. I'm definitely not going to do it the second time. So it means the population is sitting ducks. But Francis Christian pointed out at the beginning of this thing, when a bunch of us across the country were meeting, and he said, to fight communist terrorism and authoritarianism, you use comedy and build parallel institutions. So that's why I make fun of them, because it's funny. And the other thing is we've got to build new institutions. People can't live without legitimate healthcare. People can't live without like being able to consult a good nurse or a good doctor that can't be used to kill them. Mm-hmm. Right? So we're building those things. Mm-hmm. And one thing we're doing massively, because there's only a small percentage of us, even if you could take all the doctors who passed the test, who've held the ground, who've lost their license, even if you took all of them together and said, okay, everybody in Canada see these doctors, there's not enough of us to go around. There's only a handful. So that's why one of the things I'm focusing on is educating the public so they don't have to have chronic diseases, so they don't have to give their kids autoimmune conditions, so they know how to, ultimately we're going to do education on trauma care and everything. Because we've got to get medicine out of this controlled cult thing and make it free and liberal for the people to utilize and learn. So that's where we're going. I don't think we should get too down, because there's still a lot of people living in a zoo. We don't. And, I'm in meetings right now. People are looking at, people want the doctors and nurses who stood up. You can't hold back the free market forever. especially by a murderous clan who ultimately will go to some form of prison for what they've done.
Mhm.
Some
Well,
form of prison.
I couldn't agree with you more, and thank you for that wonderful response, because so different than myself, I see things like an old soldier, and I see my medics being taken off of the field for trying to save soldiers' lives, but at the same time, I see the enemy that is rearmed, refurbished, supplied with a whole new tickle box of weapons that they're now pointing at society, and our own leadership is like, it's like World War One, where over the trenches, go kill another half more of us because we told you so. And I can't look at any of this as being anything different than a bioweapons program, which to me, in my mind, makes it a military operation. And basic understanding, when the military wants to take control of your nation, they have the most authority, apparently, throughout history. At least it appears that way. And so, am I far off on interpreting this that way, Sasha? Because there was some work that you and Catherine did, and I think this goes back to the COVID trials, where this fraud was not a fraud, which makes this an act of hostility on innocent and unsuspecting societies by their own governments and establishments. And with this great hope and change in Maha and President Trump, these are the guys that are supposed to save the world from all of this. But yet I see, that's what I see. I see a weapons program, and somebody's running it.
Yeah, it is a weapons program. So once I met Catherine, I started looking into the laws that are being used, and the key piece of law that was mentioned in PrEP Act. And it was designed only for chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear attacks. So it wasn't designed for, mass producing medical products and deploying them on civilian population and forcing mandates. So that's definitely wasn't part of how it was justified. It was justified as an extraordinary, very narrowly deployed in both in time and in space. So all these biological weapons or chemical weapons attacks, they're never global. There's no such thing as a global pandemic, for example, or global, even if it's a bioweapon attack, it can't happen globally. That's not how they are always deployed very locally. They don't spread. And so the law was justified only for limited to use of bioweapons or chemical weapons in war and or terrorism, which is and only like for a short period of time. That's why they started with 2 weeks, but now we're in a decade of it. And also supposed to be very localized, never supposed to be nationwide or international. And so that was the first sign. And then I started reviewing all the contracts that were given for COVID, and they're all from DoD. Department of Defense issued all these contracts to award Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Johnson, all the PCR tests and remdesivir and ventilators, and a lot of services, and a lot of propaganda services, and a lot of censorship services. Also, all these cybersecurity, Stanford Internet Observatory, all of this went through DoD as a COVID response awards. And all of them are written as military weapons contracts. They're highly redacted. They're still very redacted. And I also noticed that they used the contracting frameworks and clauses to basically ensure that there's no accountability. So they're written in such a way as, well, it's going to be rigorously monitored, and part of rigorous monitoring is going to be you're going to write a report, okay? And I'm like, okay, that's completely toothless, right? You can write any kind of report. So stuff like that. And so eventually we've traced the entire framework. It's military controlled. I also ultimately received a whistleblower tape from AstraZeneca internal executive meeting, where the CEO of AstraZeneca and the VP of monoclonal antibodies, Mark Esser, discuss how they were approached by DARPA in 2017 to work on countermeasures on these. So DARPA will be identifying pandemic viruses, no matter, we don't know how. And the pharmas are going to be making products such as vaccines and therapeutics within 60 days, to which Mark Esser says, I thought it was science fiction first, because it is science fiction, because it's not possible to make vaccines and therapeutics in 60 days. And as experienced drug development professional, he knows it. But of course, it's, the government, the military gives you money. So they participated in this. And then Mark Esser says that on February 4th, 2020, they received a phone call from DARPA, from Colonel Matt Hepburn, telling them, the entire pharmaceutical consortium, telling them to switch to COVID because it was declared national security threat. And this was a full month before President Trump said anything about emergency or, declaring emergency, before HHS formally declared emergency. So the military declared that this is a national security threat. We still don't know why and how, and based on what. There's no justification for it provided. They classified it. Then they arm wrestled with Trump or whatever they did with Trump, but he's now fully on board. Maybe, you could say from what we've traced at that time that he didn't know fully what was going on. But since then, he's been completely converted and promoting this mass murder. But it was announced by the military. They also distributed money to themselves. About $50 billion went out the door before Trump could even blink. And then he got pissed off about it, fired the lady, the military procurement person, Jennifer Santos. She was immediately switched over to Navy. So it wasn't real firing. So it's military ran ahead. They couldn't care less who's in charge, POTUS, what POTUS, we're doing our plan. And distributed money to themselves, distributed it to the consortium, told them to go work on COVID vaccines because the vaccines was the ultimate target, to get everyone fooled to go and destroy themselves with these vaccines. So 2/3 of the population at the minimum have shortened their lifespan correctly using these poisons. But overall, it's a military campaign. And I don't believe Trump is doing anything, or even RFK Jr. is doing anything. I haven't seen anything really toward addressing that issue, the core issue, that this is an ongoing classified military campaign, because they're both still going, and lying about these critical issues like PrEP Act, the ongoing PrEP Act declaration, all the, everything that I've just described, even though they both know it. So that's why I'm saying we have to call them on it daily now and demand that it's declassified and we have full accountability. Who pulled the bring Matt Hepburn into Congress, ask him these questions. Who told you that this is a national security threat, and based on what? Nobody's doing anything.
Dr. Sansone, this conversation here between all of you, thank you, is helping me fill in some pieces on this. This is, Iran-Contra on steroids, literally with the pharma industry. So somebody's been captured, whether it's the Oval Office or somebody else. That's captured the military. If the military is in control and continuing this program, this is an unrestricted program. This is psyops, it's bioweapons, it's policy, it's every diabolical tool in the toolbox, and it's still ongoing. And yesterday when I was reading that there were 7 states that were filing criminal charges against Fauci and associates, I had hope. I had hope.
It's not that. It's vigilant Fox is just like writing clickbait narratives like this so that people pick it up. I actually interviewed the group that has sent criminal briefs. So this is Veer's group, Rachel Rodriguez and Mimi Miller. They've sent criminal briefs to AGs and DAs in those states, but nobody is prosecuting Fauci.
Yeah, I interviewed Rachel too, and what they're sending is they're sending referrals but you're still left with a prosecutor having to do their job. And so that gets, if you read the articles, it's there, but people see the headlines and get, they don't actually read, unfortunately. But I mean, they're doing good work putting the evidence there. That's what we were doing with National Arm early on too. But it's, that's why I've shifted toward pushing legislation, because we shouldn't need a law because they're already illegal. Guess what? It's illegal to murder people in the hospital too. So you shouldn't need to be doing criminal. They should be investigating this without you having to do that. But I think it's good they're putting the evidence there. But no, they're not charging him with anything. We just had a rally on Monday that I spoke at. Surgeon General Ladapo was speaking at. It was like a kind of a counter thing to Fauci coming to Sarasota, because he was speaking. I don't know who the hell would want to hear him speak, but he was speaking there. And we do have to call out Trump. We do have to call out RFK Jr. We do have to call out everybody at this point, because nobody has cover. Like one of the loudest applauses I got was when I was calling out Governor DeSantis and Trump, because they know it's a bioweapon, and they do. And so whoever's running our government behind the scenes is oligarchy. It's obviously an international game, because as well as I do, if you get 8 or 12 friends together sitting around at a dinner table, similar cultural backgrounds, political backgrounds, you guys are going to debate the nuances of every different issue. How did they get the whole world to follow the same stupid, unscientific protocol? It's clearly a conspiracy against the human race. And you don't have to be that bright to figure out if they're lowering lifespans and they're reducing birth rates. It's a depopulation game. And so we're looking at the most evil form of technocracy coming up. I mean, day 2 in the Trump administration, they unveiled Stargate with their AI and their mRNA. I mean, come on, really? Seriously, they want to replace whole branches of government with AI. That's not my idea of limited government. My idea of limited government is you get rid of most of the government and we're free. I don't want more efficient government. I want less government. And so, yeah, I agree. It's just a big smoke and mirrors game at this point. But I had open eyes. I literally wrote an article saying I'm voting for Trump because the other side's going to kill us more quickly. And so that's just where we're at. But I don't think we should have learned helplessness. I do think we should keep fighting to get a jurisdiction to do the right thing here, because if we can get one jurisdiction to recognize these shots and the products and the shots as being in violation of weapons of mass destruction laws, I think the whole house of cards is going to fall apart. It'll be chaotic, but that's where we need to go. And someone has to have a backbone and do their job. And it's pathetic that we all work harder than the people that are paid to do this.
Some great points there, man. I'm sad that we've only got an hour to chat today, but some of the things that I'm noticing, I've been so blessed to meet so many of the most brilliant people on earth fighting for humanity, and they all seem to be narrowing their energies towards policy, because and I think that's actually important, because the crooks don't stand on the crookery. They create the policies to hide behind so that they can commit the crimes. And what my old soldier brain sees, the race for the arrow, the race for the cannon, the race for nuclear arms, then it was the race for bioweapons, and now the race for AI. There's always this escalation of, if we don't do it, they will, and that is what they use to justify their poor behaviors. And Mark, to you on this, we'll give you guys each a couple of minutes to share your thoughts, and we got, I think, 6 minutes left. You've been involved with the World Council for Health since its inception, understanding and knowing that we have to fight these policies, and you guys have done a huge amount of work fighting the WHO with the mass pandemic treaty policies that they're using to, in my opinion, protect and entrench exactly everything that we're here to warn them about. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh yeah, sure. Policy-driven dictatorship. In fact, that everything's infiltrated, and so they can actually subvert. Even they have multiple ways to achieve their goals. I mean, you look at WHO, IHR, and then the UN come over here and meanwhile does another version of the same thing. Meanwhile, the Canadian federal government does C-293. Meanwhile, the provincial government, like in BC, does the Health Professions Occupations Act. So what you see is many layers all creating a dictatorship and undermining what these institutions that used to function. And I think a big theme for all of us is Exodus. You know, I mean, almost if we were going to stay late and dance, I would put on Bob Marley, Exodus. You know, like we are in many ways exodusing these systems. Now, it's not something you can do overnight, but you know, people are taking control of their health. For instance, people are saying, no, I'm going to get educated and make health decisions for my family. No, you're not sticking that needle in my kid. You know, there's that side of it. And there's people trying to take back the old government, saying we have an election, which I think will be a fraud coming up in Canada, but I definitely
it's a choice on who's going to kill us faster.
Yeah, well, when you have an unelected globalist bankster suddenly appears as the prime minister. The polls overnight say that they went from 100 behind to 100 ahead. I think people should see the writing on the wall, but at the same time, people like, you know, Dr. David Speaker, people like Jody Ledgerwood, you know, people like Maxime Bernier, people like Grant Abraham, people that are trying to, you know, sort of take control of that bus that is plowing through the mob. Our government's plowing through the crowd, killing people. You know, so I have a lot of respect and I support them. At the same time, I support people who are just trying to slash the tires on the bus so it doesn't run anybody else over. But I think we need to be exiting, shifting our weight away from them. And then something for people that I think, I mean, I don't know if I'm ready to pull off my last layer of rose-colored glasses. I mean, I'm still hanging on to some hope here that, you know, RFK is in there trying to do the right thing and that he's not, you know, really hooked on the taste of human veal. But I think one of the tricks is, you know, I was in a meeting last week and people said, well, one of the reasons no government is going to admit, no politician will be able to say, hey, total, you know, abuse of the people, because what would happen is the damages, so many people are damaged that the damages would collapse the governments economically. So even if a good person takes over a government, they win an election, and, you know, if elections were real, and maybe they are some places, then if they wanted to fix it, the first thing they would do would bankrupt the government. So I would like to offer at least a sketch of a solution to that problem, which is guns don't kill people. People that squeeze triggers kill people. Governments under criminal control don't kill people. The criminals manipulating the government and doing the deeds, the woman who signed the contract with Pfizer on behalf of Public Health Agency of Canada, you know, et cetera. There's a lot of criminals who just committed one of the most massive crimes against humanity in history. And yeah, they're still plowing forward with new plans. They've empowered themselves in the old system. They have more than enough to compensate the victims. And I think it's very important to me that these things are approached not as civil issues for the government agencies that were hijacked to pay, but that the criminals who did the deeds, the Anthony Fauci's, the Justin Trudeau's, the Christy Freelands, the Martina Tams, the Tedroses, the Gates, the Fauci's, these are the people who've amassed the wealth, and these are the people who need to be stripped of their wealth. These are the people who need to be prosecuted. And so if there's anyone legitimate, like let's hope Trump and RFK are very legitimate, you don't need to negotiate with Bill Gates to get donations. Lock him up and strip him of every single thing he owns, because it's all the proceeds of crime. Then we can start compensating things. Then we can solve our economic problems real quick, because 90% of the world's wealth is owned by a small group of people who should be prosecuted one way or the other. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents. Otherwise, you know, World Counts for Health, you know, well, we continue focused on trying to help people deal with the shots and get better.
I hate to interrupt, but I want to give
please do
the other guests 30 seconds here yet. But the one thing that I think that the unifying factor all of our societies need to understand is they have failed to deliver justice. With no justice, there can be no future. We cannot build a future on injustice. So your final thoughts here today, Sasha. I really wish I could give you guys more time. This has been a brilliant discussion. Thank you so much for joining us today. So Sasha and then Dr. Sansone, last closing words.
Right. So there's a lot of talk about, you know, like again in the U.S., you know, Trump, RFK Jr. is in charge. We're winning. There's going to be accountability. So far, you know, and I hope there will be accountability. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm just saying they haven't told the truth yet officially. And so there's a lot of talk about restoring trust in health agencies or in government overall. Trust cannot be restored by continued lying. So they're trying to reshape narratives, and they're trying to change the messaging and massage the public perceptions and focus groups and so forth to just get themselves greater approval ratings. That's not the way to restore the trust. The trust can only be restored. This is a massive, massive crime. The likes of it, human history has never recorded. And we're living it now. Until they start telling the truth, we will never restore the trust in anything. And yeah, I agree. We need to build parallel systems. Because people should not go to the hospitals. People should not take their children to pediatricians. You can't go there because they're trying to kill you as we speak. And they're continuing to try to kill you as we speak.
You're going to die. Get over it. Now you just need to decide whether you're going to grovel on your knees like a coward or if you're going to stand up like a man or a woman.
Or do you want to be strict to your bed and shove the poison needle in you? No. I'd die in the woods. I mean, seriously.
No, I wasn't talking to you. That's my closing comment.
Yeah.
My closing comment.
I think that's probably a unanimous thought, Sasha. I'll go die in the woods before I will ever subject myself to their system again. Thank you guys all for taking the time to join us on a Easter weekend. So much respect. If you guys are out there watching, stay tuned. It's going to get even more lively in the next segment that we've got coming up. And we've still got a couple more hours of all of this. So have an amazing weekend wherever you're tuning in from. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you to such amazing and brave guests for joining us tonight. So
thank you.
Thanks,
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Likewise. Happy Easter.